Part 18. Infinite Doomsday Start Draws Luodu Mechanic. Author, Shanmao Aichiji. Chapter 171. The stone was not thrown directly into the cave, but hit the edge of the cave less than 1 meter away. As a result, there was a loud crash, and not only did the ground there suddenly collapse due to the impact, but also other places around it also sank a lot. "Be careful, it won't hurt." Tia patted the dust on her hands and said calmly. Tia's calm look, coupled with the sudden collapse of the big hole, made Anya speechless for a long time. Now, she was really scared, and she also understood the necessity of Tia's preparations just now. Even if she also studied lightning and could teleport, it would be difficult for her to quickly cast teleportation magic when the ground suddenly collapsed. At the critical moment, the rope tied to her body could still give her a relatively loose casting space. Of course, all this is unnecessary now. Taking a deep breath, Anya followed Tia obediently and moved to the vicinity of the cave little by little. She looked down at the situation below, calculated a little, and felt that the problem was not big, so she turned around and made a gesture to Ruger and began to gather magic power. Soon, ice balls containing strong ice magic appeared again on the top of Anya's staff. Under the control of Anya, the creator, these ball magics that could not launch ice spears fell from the sky into the sea of fire one by one, like old-fashioned aerial bombs. Puff, puff. The temperature difference between the ice magic and the flame heat wave formed a messy airflow, but it was hard to say whether it was more conducive to the spread of ice gas or flame. It was true that Anya's ice was the product of magic condensation, and the magic blood fire at the bottom of the crypt was not a natural flame. Neither of them had the intention of dissipating easily under the messy air blowing or even cutting, and they still stubbornly fought for territory with each other. Seeing that Anya was almost exhausted from condensing magic and had not extinguished the magic fire below, Ruger hurried over and carried her back to rest. "Yes, I'm sorry, it's all my fault." After being held in Ruger's arms, Anya murmured in shame. Seeing her like that, Ruger felt distressed and a little angry. He thought to himself that his granddaughter loves to reflect too much, right? If she loves to reflect so much, wouldn't it be easy for others to poo and get Stockholm Syndrome? She had clearly vowed before that she was a prisoner of war and did not work hard. But now she has worked hard but failed, and she feels so depressed that it is useless to reflect on herself. Alas! Ruger sighed deeply in his heart, and showed a refreshing smile to his granddaughter. "Don't take it to heart, hasn't little Anya done her best? Rest well now, and leave the rest to us." Just 2 sentences and a smile, in Anya's eyes, are as warm and kind as the sun. Under the influence of this warm sunshine, Anya, who was on the verge of exhaustion before, finally relaxed and slowly fell asleep. But she mumbled a sentence in her little mouth. "Dad, Dad." When Ruger heard her mutter such a name, he was slightly stunned, but soon relaxed. "Okay, Dad is Dad." The little girl was so awkward because she lacked a father in the first half of her life. After all, he was her grandfather in the other dimension, and it was time to cure this child's heart disease. Although childhood shadows, once formed, are difficult to heal even if you treat them for a lifetime. He carried Anya back to the Rogers, took out a sleeping bag and put her on it, and helped her to get a comfortable posture. Then he asked the Rogers to take care of him first, and he went back to Tia. "How is she? Is she okay?" Tia looked at Anya and then at him, and asked. "She fell asleep because her magic power was exhausted, and she had a heart disease since she was a child," Ruger explained. "She will be fine after a sleep." "Yeah." Tia had actually heard about what happened there a long time ago, and what she said from the bottom of her heart was somewhat unpleasant. But firstly, Ruger and Anya had a special relationship after all, and secondly, she also knew that Anya had been miserable since she was a child, so she could only pretend that she didn't see them recognizing each other over there, so as not to look jealous no matter what she did. And Ruger also saw that she had seen those things a long time ago, and he felt even more affectionate when he saw her like this, and he hugged her in his arms. What are you doing? Tia was somewhat surprised to be hugged in his arms in front of so many people. But that feeling was particularly good, and she didn't want to leave at all, so she could only ask this question in a soft voice. Thank you for your hard work. Ruger hugged her tighter when he heard it. Hard work? What hard work? If it were someone else, I'm afraid they wouldn't understand what Ruger's sudden outburst of emotions was all about. But Tia understood instantly that he saw the hardship of Anya being raised by her adoptive mother since she was an orphan, and thought of herself in the same situation, so she suddenly burst out with emotions. In fact, Tia really wanted to say that it was not hard. After all, she is different from Anya. Katala, who adopted her, would not force her to practice martial arts, but would find various reasons to let her rest and play after work. Compared with Anya, who lived next door, her childhood was much better. But when she thought of the vague appearance of her biological parents in the depths of her memory, her nose was sore and tears immediately condensed in her eyes. However, those things are over. Although Katala also left her, at least she had Luodu. Thinking of this, Tia hugged Luodu tighter. The two stood beside the crypt, hugging each other tightly, as if they wanted to warm each other's wounded heart with themselves. Just. Hey, isn't it? You guys figure out the situation, okay? Be serious, we're fighting here. What's wrong with you guys? Have you been poisoned by love? Roger and his friends watched the show and complained. 3 firepower hands were responsible for the output in the front, and one was left behind to plug Anya's ears, so as not to wake her up and add another patient with emotional outburst. The speaker is unintentional, but the listener is intentional. At first, Ruger didn't take their words seriously at all, until he heard that word, which made him stunned. Love poison. Ruger knew his own affairs. He had been a steel straight man for so long. Although he was not without an emotional heart, he had become a doctor after a long illness, and had long been accustomed to suppressing those emotions. It is true that he was moved to tears when watching a TV series or a movie, but he rarely had such strong emotions in the real event. Even on the night he broke up with his ex, he only vented his emotions afterwards and didn't show them in person. But why? He suddenly couldn't control his emotions. Even the usually calm Tia was like this? Could it be? Ruger turned his head and looked at the crypt. Looking at the pink smoke that was accidentally splashed onto the ground in the collision between the ice magic energy and the magic blood flame, he couldn't help but frown. Magic blood. Infinite Doomsday Start draws Luodu mechanic. Author, Shanmao Aichiji. Chapter 172. Could the inexplicable smoke emitted after the foul-smelling blood in the blood pool was the source of the sudden and violent emotional fluctuations of the crowd? This matter was quickly confirmed by the system. Google search reading. Because there was an extra line of information in the status bar of Ruger's attribute panel. Sadness, abnormal state. The person who is affected is very likely to fall into grief, and according to the personality characteristics of the person, negative effects such as negativity and powerlessness appear. Legend has it that the Maiden of Pain, Maiden of Anguish, Andariel has mastered a poisonous gas that makes people grief-stricken. But its effect should be stronger. Ruger took a look and thought, well, the system almost told the truth. In the end, isn't this a hint that the bloody countess here has a poisonous gas that is weaker than Andariel's grief gas? Most likely, it is the kind that made everyone fall into the trap. Think about it, at present, Rog and the other 5 are fine, only himself, Tia and Anya have been hit. What is the biggest difference between the two parties? At present, the 3 of them have approached the cave entrance, and Rog and the others have been watching from afar. Coupled with this heartache, Rog directly believed the hint of the system, most likely the same evil spirit as Andariel, the Lord of Pain. Among the 7 demon kings of hell, the others are easy to distinguish, but Andariel, the Lord of Pain, and Duriel, the Lord of Suffering, have always been difficult to distinguish. For Rog, he has always agreed with this point of view. Andariel's pain is more spiritual. The pain of despair due to fear. So Andariel has always been considered to be a pair with Diablo, the Lord of Fear. Duriel's suffering is more physical. It is the suffering of pain caused by torture. There is a paragraph in the information about Duriel in the system. It is well known that Duriel enjoys torturing and inflicting pain. However, he does not seem to care what the pain means to the recipient. He seems to like the music formed by their screams and their pain on a sensory level. According to Dick Kane, Duriel considers himself a master of pain, but he is only interested in physical torture rather than mental pain. Many works show that if Duriel cannot inflict pain on his victims, he will let himself suffer extreme pain and feel satisfied. However, according to Duriel himself, the anticipation of pain is often more refined than its fruit. In short, Duriel is more like a sadist in the traditional sense, sadistic. Andariel, who is always considered a sadistic queen, is more like a witch who likes to play with people's emotions. And it is obvious that the bloody countess who was mixed up with Andariel in the first act was the undead monster resurrected from the grave by Andariel himself. It is natural for her to master some of Andariel's methods. After confirming the source, the problem was much easier to solve. Lugger first put on separate oxygen masks for himself and Tia, and stopped breathing air. In this way, they would not be infected by the tragic poison gas for the second time. Then, he directly exchanged 2 shots of universal antidote in the pharmacy store and injected himself and Tia. However, the effect cannot be said to be no, but it is not very good. The negative entries in Lugger's attribute panel, although the font has faded, are still firmly there. Brother Lou, what's going on? Although Tia allowed him to do it without objection, it was out of trust in him and she didn't know what happened. When she heard what was going on from Lugger, she exhaled lightly and took out 2 bottles of black antidote from her small bag. Try this. Sure enough, the right medicine is the most effective. It is easiest to defeat magic with magic. As soon as Ruger drank the magic detoxification potion, which was also produced in the dark plane, he found that the negative entries in the panel faded rapidly and disappeared completely in a short while. It works so well, Ruger sighed, but soon became puzzled again. Since this is so effective, it means that there should be many people in the dark plane who have been affected by this poison gas. But why didn't Anya and Tia, the 2 alchemists, realize that there was poison gas? In other words, why didn't the 2 who were also affected suspect that their condition might be caused by this poison gas? This, Tia immediately came to her senses when she heard Ruger's question. We only heard about it from our elders, but we haven't seen it for a long time. Is it because your generation has never seen Andariel, so you have forgotten the effect of this thing? Ruger asked immediately. What he said makes sense. Think about how embarrassing the situation of Rogue Town was before, and the army of monsters was almost at the doorstep. If it weren't for Lugger's sudden appearance and Sarah's coincidence in becoming an Iron Man warrior, the monsters might have really broken through the defense line of the cold plains and entered the blood wasteland. In this case, no matter how powerful the Nephilim were, how could they possibly enter the monster's main lair and face the boss Andariel? However, not really. Tia shook her head quickly. Although it's a bit miserable now, the last time the Nephilim saw Andariel and was able to come back alive was only 2 or 3 years ago. The main thing is that in the past 10 to 20 years, Andariel has not used this kind of attack anymore. Some people are weaker. They just met her and ran away when they found that they couldn't beat her. It's normal for these people not to encounter poison gas attacks. But there are also teams that fought with her for a whole half day before retreating. They should have encountered that kind of attack, but they didn't. Although no one has evidence, there is a rumor in Rogue Town that Andariel now only has the body of the Queen of Pain and can't use magic. Only the body. Rogue narrowed his eyes when he heard it. Then where did her soul go? I don't know. Tia shook her head. Some people say that she may have found the way back to hell and has already gone back. Some people even say that when she comes back from hell, the whole world will be completely hellish and completely destroyed. Some people say that she has actually died in pain, and her soul can't bear so much pain, so she chose eternal liberation. Of course there is a compromise, saying that she is just lazy, so her soul went to sleep, leaving her body to guard the monster's main nest. When Ruger heard this is really a full-scale and no dead-angle idea. All kinds of possibilities have been said by these people. What else can be said? Anyway, there is only one point, because since Tia and Anya were born, no one has been hit by Andariel's genuine painful magic, so they have no awareness of it. As for why the Bloody Countess has it here, but other Nephilim have never encountered it? This question is too simple for Ruger. Did any of the Nephilim who came here to try to kill the Bloody Countess destroy the deepest blood pool, including the pool and the blood? No, right? So it was natural that Lugger and his team encountered this for the first time. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Infinite Doomsday Start draws Luodu mechanic. Author, Shanmao Aichiji. Chapter 173. Since it was confirmed that the poisonous gas was from the Queen of Pain, Lugger and the others were not in a hurry to go down. He and Tia simply continued to blow up the upper building structure on the ground, making the crypt bigger and bigger. It was a simple truth. The bigger and wider the entrance of the crypt was blown, the faster the magic inside would dissipate. After discussing with Sarah and others, Lugger and others also tended to believe that the effect of the tragic poisonous gas in the blood pool should be just an accident. It was the Bloody Countess who used Andariel's magic to create the blood pool, which gave it the ability to quickly transform humans into monsters. It was not that she deliberately set a poisonous gas trap there and waited for others to destroy her blood pool. Taiwan Novel Network Rightward Arrow. Of course, it cannot be ruled out that this faded trace of grief magic is not the last line of defense of the blood pool itself. But in general, the attack of Lugger and the other three should be just a coincidence. After all, the effect was too weak. It only made Anya, who had the most unhealthy mind and the worst mental ability, faint. And Ruger and Tia were fine. It's hard to say. When hearing Ruger's summary, Sarah changed the subject and said, I've heard a saying that Andariel's pain is the deepest when she can't get what she wants. She is pursuing someone's love. Her courtship, Tia asked curiously, could it be the Dread Lord? Maybe. Sarah nodded ambiguously. It's because her pain comes from courtship, so the most immune to her painful magic is the true love of lovers. Maybe, the effect of your attack is not poor, not because the magic is weak, but because your love is strong enough. Wow, true love is immune to everything, the Rogs immediately chirped and laughed when they heard it. It's like a fairy tale, so nice. Alas, I don't know when I can meet my true love. I don't know who he will be. Will he be a barbarian warrior or a bear druid? Tisk tisk, Issa, you exposed your XP. You have always liked muscular men since you were a child, right? You even killed a bear man. Why don't you talk about the paladin? Humph, no paladin is good, I don't want it. That's right, no paladin is good. You can find a boyfriend with anyone, even a necromancer or an ordinary person. But I will never consider a paladin. Sarah's rogues are really extraordinary. When the paladin is mentioned, they immediately become angry. And Anya, who had been sleeping over there, opened her eyes without knowing when. But hearing the rogues' condemnation of the paladins, especially those dirty things that outrageous to both humans and gods, she, as a former member of the paladin cult, can't help feeling a little uncomfortable. If it were before, she would have rushed out to argue with Rog and others, trying to prove that these things were all false. But since being captured by Ruggy, she has been in contact with other people, including humans and Rog. 1 or 2 people is prejudice, 3 or 4 people is widespread prejudice, but if everyone has an opinion on the Paladin, how can she convince herself that these are all false? Could it be that Ruggy deliberately let her contact these people, so there will naturally be selective bias? Well, until today, she has been persuading herself in this way. But everything changed after she heard Ruggy's words. Little Anya has done her best, now take a good rest. Perhaps it was the influence of the grief poison, but deep in her heart, she has been constantly yearning for care and protection. The poison only magnified this point. And if she wants to accept Ruggy's care with peace of mind, she must first convince herself that this person is trustworthy. And if he is trustworthy, then the previous set of the people she contacted who disliked the Paladin were selected by him in advance cannot be established. If she still had that idea, how could she accept Ruger happily? The little girl was now in this dilemma. Just as she tried to pretend to be asleep, but twisted her sleeping bag subconsciously because of the entanglement, Tia had already walked over with the antidote. Here, drink the medicine when you wake up. Upon hearing this, Anya hugged the sleeping bag tightly with her backhand, as if she wanted to crawl into the crack of the ground with the sleeping bag. But she also knew that this was useless, and finally sat up slowly, took Tia's medicine and drank it all. Thank you. Yet Tia nodded, and didn't say anything. She left her an oxygen mask and was about to leave. This time, Anya suddenly called her. Can we chat? Tia was also stunned when she heard the words, but she quickly turned back, smiled and nodded, okay. As far as I can remember, this is the first time the two of them have sat together and chatted calmly in the past year. For the two who have been fighting since childhood, this feeling is a bit strange. But as long as they get past that strangeness, there are actually many topics for them to talk about. In addition to 2 topics. The Paladin Order. And alchemy. To be precise, it is the making of alchemical potions. Tia has always emphasized that she is a fire alchemist who specializes in the weapons of the Lost Ones and has a deep attainment in things like the Big Diablo bomb. But in fact, she has already surpassed others in the attainments of various strange alchemical potions, and can even be called the best in Rogue Town. Akara, the leader of Rogue Town, was a master of alchemy 50 years ago, and in theory, he should be better than her. But he was a leader after all, and now he is old, and no one will distract him from making potions. In contrast, Anya is the last disciple of Akara's last disciple, and should have inherited the best technology. Most people in Rogue Town also think so. Even her most indispensable ability in the Paladin Order is her identity as an alchemist. But the person involved knows that Anya has never won over Tia. She can make the potion achieve the best theoretical effect through the most detailed and comprehensive preparation and the most sophisticated method. But with the same time and the same materials, Tia can make 10 times more potions than hers, and the effect is not weaker but stronger. This is a talent gap, so it's better not to force it. This is Akara's comment on them. Of course, he didn't say it directly to her, but privately advised Master Anya not to force her and help her out. However, she overheard it from the corner of the wall. It was after this incident that she became more distant from Tia, and after Austin praised her potion level, she was accepted into the cult by the latter's olive branch. Huh? Just for this kind of thing, you easily believed that beast. Tia was actually a little annoyed when she heard her tell the truth at this time. You are always so law-abiding, but you always like to get stuck in a rut on this kind of thing. Why do you think your alchemy level is not good? Is it really a talent? Infinite Doomsday Start draws Luodu mechanic. Author, Shanmao Aichiji. Chapter 174. Let me ask you, since you were a child, Have you ever blown up your family's alchemy room? No, right, Taya continued. You rarely make mistakes. I heard you've never even made half a spark. As I write this, I hope readers will remember our domain name Taiwan Novel Network rightward arrow. Hoo, think about me again. As she said that, Taya stood up straight and raised up the beauty that made Anya envious, and said like a proud rooster. Our alchemy workshop will be blown up by me 3 times a month. What qualifications do you have to compare with me? What? Anya's eyes turned red with anger when she heard this, and she thought to herself, what kind of nonsense is this? She never made a mistake, but she blew up her house every 2 days. How come in the end, I can't compare with her? What's the point? The reason why she keeps making mistakes and blowing up the house is because she is always trying new recipes and new techniques. Lugger also came over at this time, comforted the ice mage who was about to fight Taya again, and explained to her. These are all her own gains. No one else can learn from them and no one dares to learn from them. But precisely because of this, she naturally mastered a more efficient formula than what you passed down. And you just learned the things from your predecessors one stroke at a time, and you never dared to make mistakes. It was like she kept running down the rough road in front of her, falling down every step she took. But she was not afraid of pain or dirt. She stood up, patted the dust and continued running forward. But you walked cautiously on the smooth road, walking until you reached the end of the road, and you stopped there. So, I will never be able to catch up with her. Anya herself reacted and murmured in a daze, and she will only fall further and further behind. How can I compare with her? Sometimes the answer is so simple and terrifying. Yes, the reason why she is not as good as Tia is that simple, because Tia is always taking risks to improve her formula, while she just follows the rules to gain the approval of others. Perhaps during the long pursuit, Anya had already faintly sensed a hint of the truth, but due to inertia, she subconsciously ignored the real answer. At that moment, Anya fell onto the sleeping bag again, as if she had completely lost her strength, and even lost the motivation to get up again. Okay, it's not your fault. Lugger hurried over and patted her head, comforting her. Actually, this is normal for you. Her situation is too special and cannot be compared. After all, there is no one richer than Lord Catala in your entire Rog Town, right? What do you mean? Taya was the first to quit after hearing this. But even Anya turned to look at him. Isn't it obvious? Luge smiled and said to Taya. Other than Mr. Catala, the richest man in Rog Town, who has the money to afford it. Why are you so bombing every 3 days? After all, your abilities are all acquired with money. We children from poor families must not only follow the rules and avoid making mistakes as much as possible. Really? As he spoke, he patted Anya's shoulder with his hand to express comfort. Anya didn't know whether she was attracted by his words or what, but she didn't resist his behavior at all. After hearing what he said, Anya nodded her head with deep concern and said in her heart. That's right, I can't compare to her, just because our family is not as rich as theirs, and we can't come up with the funds to rebuild the house every 3 days. At this time, she automatically forgot that her adoptive mother was a close disciple of Akala, the leader of Rogtown. Moreover, their family can live next door to the Katara family, at least within the confines of Rogtown, they are of the same class. In any case, Lugger's comfort finally found a last solace for Anya's broken heart. Especially when Luji said another sentence to her, it made her heart surge. Lugger told her that now she can completely learn from Taya back then and try more and make more mistakes. Because her family is rich now. If before, Ruger would have caused strong opposition from the little witch by suggesting that he was Anya's grandfather. But now, she nodded obediently and unconsciously hugged Luja's big hand, which patted her shoulder to comfort her. She actually recognized Luji's identity as an elder. As time goes by, the poisonous gas exposed in the crypt slowly dissipates. The fire at the bottom of the cave is getting darker and darker due to the consumption of fuel. During this time, some new monsters such as dark shooters also appeared at the bottom. But before they could climb along the broken ceiling to the ground, they were already targeted for elimination by ROG. There is a saying in the background setting of the original game that the monsters in that world are just projections of their bodies in the hell plane. Killing the projection will not affect the main body, and the main body will project new projections after a while. In Ruger's view, this is probably a way to explain the game's refresh mechanism. Because the monsters in the dark world are not only demons, but also demonized animals and undead. Demons can be said to be projections that are lower than the original body, but how to explain demonized animals and undead? The raw materials of the latter two are sufficient, so they can be refreshed at will. However, in this world, most people seem to really believe that those monsters are projections of hell. But unlike what Ruger knew before, the projection of hell they think is closer to the concept of the embodiment of hell magic. And in fact, in the monster nests with sufficient hell magic, there will really be the phenomenon of monsters appearing out of thin air. This brings up a new question. Since magic can naturally produce monsters, why does this bloody countess still kidnap humans and transform them into half-demonized people like dark archers? It was not until Ruger did a few hours of observation at the doorstep of others that he figured this out. Other monsters also have to do both hands, and both hands are strong. On the one hand, the abundant magic will indeed condense new monsters. On the other hand, if there is a ready-made template, a relatively small amount of magic can also be used to create similar monsters. It's like you want to buy a computer. If you don't know how to configure it, as long as you have enough money, for example, a budget of 20,000, you can definitely buy a finished computer with good performance. Of course, except for the case of encountering unscrupulous merchants. But if you know how to configure it, buy the parts and assemble it yourself, maybe you only need to spend 4,000 or 5,000 to buy a bulk machine with performance similar to the finished computer with a budget of 20,000. The lair of the Bloody Countess has both. After the blood pool was destroyed by Luodu and his men, the ability to assemble new blurs by oneself was destroyed, but the effect of condensing new monsters with magic power was still in effect. Infinite Doomsday Start draws Luodu mechanic. Author, MaleProtagonist. Chapter 175. Of course, as the opening of the crypt becomes larger and larger, more and more magic power escapes, and the efficiency of condensing magic power into monsters becomes lower and lower, and it takes longer and longer. In the first hour, at least 3 bloody goat heads and 2 dark shooters appeared. After waiting for several hours, for a whole hour, only one ghost finally condensed. It's the thing that looks like a bluebird. Then it was taken care of by an ice beam from Anya, who recovered. Ice beam, yes, is a new move invented by Anya under the encouragement and instigation of Luger's writing. In fact, it is to condense the magic power and launch it into a line at the same time. The advantage is that it is instant, powerful, and even uncapped. The disadvantage is that it has to be cast continuously, and it is easy to be interrupted and easily attacked by enemies from other directions. But for Anya, who is already in the team, her shortcomings are infinitely reduced. Of course, the biggest benefit of this magic to Anya is not its power, but that it makes Anya trust Luger more. Because this proves that what Ruger said before is correct, and he also has the potential to improve through continuous trial and error. On the other hand, this magic was not originally used by him as an offensive magic, but as a fire extinguishing spell. Her idea was also very simple and direct. If she couldn't use one ice magic to extinguish the flames created by the demon blood, then 2. If 2 methods don't work, then 3 methods. Ever since, continuous magic rays were invented. Under the influence of this new magic, the flames finally gradually extinguished, and everyone returned to the underground again. It's really miserable here. After returning to the crypt, Tia was the first to speak. She seems to have no memory of the tragedy here, and at least 80% of it is her fault. Some of the more honest Rog over there almost complained when they heard her emotion. As a result, I couldn't hold it back and didn't say anything. I couldn't get up and down in one breath, and my face turned red from holding it in. However, Anya, who was usually the first to complain at such times, was unusually calm at this time. As if she didn't hear Tia's words, she looked warily behind the original blood pool. They had never been here before, but looking over it from a distance, there was another bottomless maze behind the blood pool. Now when I walked to the ceiling that dropped to the blood pool, I realized that the maze behind the blood pool was actually not complicated, just two deep corridors. But seeing these two corridors, many people will think of the saying, one road leads to heaven and the other leads to hell. Of course, if you put it here, it becomes one road leading to hell and the other leading to hell within hell. The reason for this is that the decoration and furnishings of the two corridors are completely different. One is quite normal, of course it is normal in this underground maze, with the same old building materials and dim lights, just like other places. But in the other corridor, not only are there two piles of bones standing at the door, but the interior decoration is either bloody or jagged with bones. It is simply deliberately telling others that if you take this road, you will become them. If there are two ways here, normal people will think there is fraud in them. For example, the road that looks bloody and scary is actually relatively smooth, while the unattractive one is the real trap. But it's also possible that the opposite is true. The designer took advantage of the viewer's thoughts and reverse designed the trap. For example, Lugger was somewhat troubled by this arrangement, so he once again sent the number 1 reconnaissance general, Launeokeo, to investigate. But soon, before Launeokeo came back, he, like Roger and others, saw Anya, who was watching the depths of the corridor warily. "What happened? What did you find?" Ruger asked hurriedly. Anya frowned when she heard this and was about to answer when she suddenly heard a gunshot coming from the corridor. After this period of adventure, he was familiar enough with the weapons of the Lost. Just by listening to the gunshots, he could guess that the target of that thing was probably him. However, when she came to her senses, she found that she was unharmed. When he looked again, he found that Luigi was already standing in front of him, stroking his chest with one hand and muttering to himself. "How funny. If I hadn't been prepared in advance, I might have capsized in the gutter this time. Are you okay?" At this time, Anya didn't understand that Lugger had blocked the bullet for him, so she asked quickly. "Don't worry, my armor is very hard, their entry-level stuff can't hurt me." Someone pretended to be relaxed, but the corners of his mouth that couldn't help but twitch while speaking still exposed his true state. At the same time, Tia and Rog had already counterattacked in the direction from which the attack came. For a moment there was a roar of gunfire. Especially Tia, she wanted to set fire to the corridor again. "Don't waste ammunition, they've already escaped." Lugger stopped him at this time. He naturally said this because Launeokeo had brought back the survey information. Even the same words were exactly what Launeokeo said a few seconds ago. Tia himself could hear Launeo's words, but he still didn't stop and waited for Lugger to shout to stop before he stopped. This shows how much she hates these enemies that suddenly appear. "Are you okay?" Tia also asked here. "Don't worry," Lugger nodded and turned to look at Sarah. "There is something I have never thought of, so I didn't ask. Did you get some of the guns in your hand from the Bloody Countess?" "Yes." Sarah didn't mean to hide it, and nodded immediately. "For such important information, remember to tell me in advance in the future." Ruger looked at Sarah with an inexplicable expression and said something, then turned around and pulled Tia and Anya and walked into the seemingly mediocre corridor. "Huh? Wasn't the gunshot on the other side just now?" Anya asked in confusion when she saw Ruger pulling her to take this road. "What two roads?" There is only one road. Tia snorted coldly when she heard the words, obviously still angry with the monster. These are all tricks. These two paths are basically parallel. Their biggest role is to cover up the third real road. The third road. Anya was puzzled. Yes, it is the wall in the middle of these two corridors. As soon as the voice fell, Tia and Ruger both raised their weapons and pulled the trigger at the wall not far ahead. Boom boom boom. Amidst a series of dense explosions and collapse sounds, the two blasted a huge hole in the wall. In the hole, the so-called third road was revealed. In the passage, there were several dark shooters holding guns, looking at the three people outside in shock. Then, they all became ghosts under the gun. Here, look, that's it. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Infinite Doomsday Start draws Luodu mechanic. Author, Shanmao Aichiji. Chapter 176. The secret of the third road was discovered. This underground maze seemed to have been explored by Ruger and others. Following the end of the third road, everyone came to a lord's hall full of medieval flavor again. The most noticeable thing in this space is the Gothic stone chair. This thing immediately reminded Ruger of another famous thing in a certain work, the Iron Throne made of swords. This is probably the throne of the Bloody Countess. However, let alone the Bloody Countess, even other monsters can't be seen here. What's going on? Is there another secret passage? Ruger's eyes changed. At this moment, a strange magical voice came from the top of the stone throne. Hee. You are awesome for being able to fight here. But your good luck ends here. If you have the ability, keep coming in. As the voice ended, the stone throne slowly descended, and actually revealed a secret passage leading to the bottom. There is actually a secret passage here. Seeing the changes there, Tia was immediately surprised. She exclaimed, and wanted to go there and take a look directly, but was stopped by Ruger. Don't rush, be careful of fraud. Ruger actually wanted to let Lao Quezao go to the front to take a look, but he didn't expect Sarah's voice to come from behind. I'll go down first. What? Ruger didn't react for a while. Looking back, he found that Sarah had transformed into an Iron Man warrior, picked up the HK-417, and jumped down the corridor. She also left a voice for Ruger. Just consider it as an apology. Apology? Ruger was stunned for a moment, and then he understood that she was talking about not mentioning to Ruger before that monsters also have the weapons of the lost. In fact, the impact of this matter can be big or small. If it causes any major losses, it is of course a very serious mistake. But now only Ruger's breastplate was dented by a rifle armor-piercing bullet of at least full power, and no one else was hurt, so the consequences of this incident were much lighter. Now that Sarah suddenly did this, Ruger really couldn't say anything to her. Didn't you see the four little rogues over there, staring at him with unfriendly faces? No problem down there, come down. Soon, Sarah's voice came from the lower level. But just when Tia was about to leave, she heard her add. That's right, how should I put it, this seems to be a Lost One ruins, don't be scared. What? Lost One ruins again? Not only Tia, but even Ruger became more interested. But he still controlled his urge to go down immediately, and pulled Tia and Anya to the side of the stone throne to check how the previous voice came out. As far as he knew, there was no magic like 1,000-mile sound transmission in the dark world magic. The demon gods may have means to achieve the same effect, but that means seems more like a dream. So on the one hand, he wanted to use this thing to find the true whereabouts of the Bloody Countess, and on the other hand, he also wanted to see if he could master this method on his side. Radio cannot be used in places where the hell is full of demonic energy, and the restrictions on the technology of the lost should not be too great. If magic can be used to make up for this part of the restriction, his real strength can still increase exponentially. Unfortunately, it turned out to be just a recording magic. The container is a gem soaked in blood. Oh, it shouldn't be called blood, it's the demon blood in the blood pool. The working principle is also quite simple, just like the automatic welcome gadgets installed in ordinary supermarkets. It's just that magic is used to achieve it. So it's no wonder that Ta only said 2 words and stopped talking. Finding that there was nothing he wanted here, Ruger shook his head somewhat helplessly. But he recovered quickly and walked down the stairs with Tia Anya. After coming down, as soon as he saw the obvious modern building materials around him, Ruger immediately agreed with Sarah's judgment. This is definitely a lost ruins. Moreover, based on his understanding of the habits of the people in this place, this lost ruins is not an ordinary residential area. Because this kind of factory-style building built with concrete is not accepted by ordinary people. I don't know how the bloody countess found this place. The secret passage under her throne is just connected to the stairs of this factory-style building. Everyone is like walking down the stairs on the ceiling of this factory. As for the factory itself, it seems that in order to facilitate entry and exit, all the previous things inside have been emptied. It feels very similar to the underground arsenal where Guimei was last time. The things were emptied, but the marks they left on the ground before were not washed clean. Judging from those marks, this place seemed to be a warehouse for stacking some large objects before. Because those marks are more like those left by large containers. What should we do? Where should we go? When Sarah saw everyone coming down, she immediately asked Ruger. In theory, the leader of this team should be the organizer Sarah. But when it comes to being familiar with the ruins of the lost, it has to be Ruger, so it's natural to look to him at this time. So Ruger was not too surprised by her question. He just looked around and pointed to a side door of the factory and said, "Go out there first and see what's going on." It doesn't matter if he goes out. The space outside is suddenly open again. What is this? Playground. Seeing the unique environment outside, Ruger couldn't help but think of the playground of his school. But this playground is obviously much larger than the playground in the school, and it may even be several times larger. If it must be called a playground, perhaps the people here are 10-meter-tall giants. Originally, Ruger was worried that there would be ghosts here. But when he saw the flat ground of the playground and the empty appearance of the factory before, he could be sure that at least this area was not under the control of the ghost. What's more, there are no glimmering mushrooms here, only the lights around the grassland itself that glow with electricity. It's as if those lights have been hungry for several days, and even the lights have a feeling of tiredness, hunger, and half-death. Fortunately, this level of light has no effect on most people present. Compared with ordinary people, the physique of Nephilim is comprehensively strengthened, including the world. Abilities like low-light vision are possessed by all Nephilim. What? What about rogues? Indeed, rogues are considered to be incompletely awakened Nephilims, and they are not necessarily much stronger than ordinary people in this aspect. But their power system comes from the blind sisterhood, and the first thing to be strengthened is vision. Ruger, the only one who does not have this ability, has also greatly improved his physical attributes, such as perception, recently because of the logistics supply. With the night vision goggles, his vision in low light state is not worse than rogues. Infinite Doomsday Start draws Luodu mechanic. Author, Shanmao Aichiji. Chapter 177. Under this special low-light vision, he had already seen clearly that there was no trace of any evil presence on this huge playground. Google search reading. No bugs, no beasts, no creep. This place is like a giant school that narrowly escaped the end of the world. To be honest, the more ruins of the lost that he saw, the more curious Luger became about how the fragments of the dark world hid here in the first place. The completeness of these scattered ruins seems to be far away from the popular perception of a comet hitting the Earth. Instead, there is a special softness here. It seemed that the layers of soil in the dark world suddenly appeared 2 to 3 meters in the air of the lost planet with a pop sound, and then they were all suppressed with a roar. Most of the soil is soft, directly burying the world below. In some places, the soil is so hard that it acts like a lid, covering the entire lower part with almost no damage. Decades later, humans arrived here again and called it the ruins of the lost. Although Ruger has not yet met a witness who can prove this incident, at least he has obtained some side evidence from Makara. The leader of Rogtown has really experienced the collision of worlds himself. According to her description, when the fragments of the Dark World finally landed on the Lost One's planet, she felt like a slight earthquake. It is far less severe than the landslide and ground cracking that occurred when the fragments of the world were separated from the complete Dark World. It was also because of her testimony that Luger came up with the hypothesis he has now. After sorting out the information in his mind, Luger looked at the empty playground in front of him again. There is no charisma, but the monster has weapons of the lost in its hands. He murmured while observing. Suddenly, as if he thought of something, his face changed. At the same time, he raised his hand to pull Taya Anya beside him and retreated to the previous factory building. Quickly retreat, there is danger here. What's wrong? Seeing his sudden change of expression, he immediately retreated, and Rog quickly followed suit. However, until everyone returned to the factory, nothing happened in the surrounding playground. In this case, others will naturally be curious. Why did you go back? Sarah asked curiously. Luge could only smile bitterly when he heard this, not knowing what to say for a moment. How to put it, obviously, from the most basic logic, this must be a trap set for them by the bloody Countess. However, so far, the trap has not shown its fangs. But the men of this bloody Countess control the weapons of the lost. And under what circumstances are most lost weapons best used? A place with a wide view, no wind, and no strong light. For example, that playground just now. If there are dozens or hundreds of monster snipers with missing weapons ambushing there under the playground, everyone has to explain almost everything when they meet each other. In fact, Ruger still wanted to say. The situation in front of him subconsciously reminded him of the scene when he wildly bombed the mysterious orcs guarding the underground arsenal. But the only direct witness to that incident was Minerva, but the barbarian eldest sister is not here now. Based on his own description alone, Luger did not have the confidence to convince these Lugers. They have only seen light weapons among lost weapons, but they have never seen what it feels like to be ambushed and attacked by heavy weapons. As for now, instead of giving an empty explanation, he prefers to make his evidence more complete. So he took out a bunch of parts with his backhand, and after banging them for a while, he built a drone that looked like a model aircraft. Raising his hand to call Launeo over, he launched the drone with its engine on into the air. As always, Now is still the pilot operating the drone in this flight mode for reconnaissance. Although such physical reconnaissance is not as fast as letting it go directly by itself, it can transmit information back through the camera on the drone in a timely manner. Overall, the efficiency is actually higher. Especially this time, Luger was determined to let the 5 Lugers experience the high-end version of lost technology. He even took out a laptop and used it as a video receiver and remote control. The real role of Launeo in this process is actually equivalent to the flight control program of the drone. After all, the flight control of a drone made on-site like Ruger cannot be improved under normal circumstances without a long period of adjustment, and it is not even enough to allow it to fly stably for a long time. It's completely different with Launeu's help. Once it enters the drone control chip, it's a bit like Ruger putting on a full body armor. Although the full body armor is not powered armor and cannot move on its own, as long as the wearer is strong enough, he can move with the armor. The same principle holds true for Launeo. As long as it has enough strength, it can completely fly the drone like a flying cat. Is Luodu strong enough? I haven't tried the Ruger, which is too big, but I can carry this small one without any problem. From the perspective of the camera in his laptop, he controlled a small reconnaissance drone to fly over the giant playground. At the same time, Luger also explained the principles of these lost technologies to the onlookers Luodu and Anya, who was not familiar with these things. Of course, the old and noisy part has been hidden. He didn't deliberately deceive his teammates. He was ashamed to talk about the fact that he was too lazy to write the flight control system, so he didn't spend much time on the details. Even so, listening to the radio, the camera, the Bernoulli equation, the updraft, etc., several Rog and Anya said that although they didn't understand, they were shocked. However, the more shocking thing was yet to come. Just when Ruger found a building opposite the giant playground from the camera that looked familiar and wanted Luodu to fly closer so that he could see it more carefully, 2 tongues of fire suddenly spurted out from the ground in front. Just then, a series of typical anti-aircraft machine gun firing sounds came, and the video screen on the laptop suddenly blurred, and the signal was completely cut off. The small drone in the sky was even worse. Under the crossfire of 2 anti-aircraft machine guns with a caliber of at least 7 mm, the thin fuselage was directly broken and disintegrated by the volley. Damn! There's anti-aircraft firepower. They can even find such a small drone? These monsters are so professional. Luger shouted immediately. What happened? The sudden appearance of anti-aircraft firepower caught Luger off guard, not to mention the girls who were watching the show obediently the second before. Seeing that the remote camera that was so magical just now suddenly failed the next second, although they didn't know what happened specifically, looking at Luger's appearance, they could guess that the situation was probably bad. This thing looks quite intimidating, why is it so fragile when it hits? The HK-21 girl over there has already complained to her sisters about the small plane just now. Infinite Doomsday start draws Luodu mechanic. Author, Shanmao Aichiji. Chapter 178. The biggest problem with these Lost One technologies is that they are easy to break. It's easy to use, but it won't last long if it breaks so easily. No wonder the Lost Ones lost in the end. Well, although Ruger heard their complaints, he had to admit that from the perspective of Ruger and others, they were right. Although most weapons and equipment are consumables in the modern era of hot weapons or the original cold weapon era. Just like most soldiers. But in the dark world with magic, this is not the case. Take the most common bows and swords as an example. If the former is of good quality and well maintained, the longest lifespan is difficult to reach 10 years. If it is used frequently, it is considered a good bow if it breaks after shooting tens of thousands of arrows. This is very similar to the life of a modern assault rifle barrel of about 20,000 bullets. And the lifespan of swords is even shorter. Under normal circumstances, if they cut the human body 10 times with great force, they need to be maintained as soon as possible. If there are several more close contacts with bones during this period, this military standard sword will most likely lose the need for maintenance. Of course, for the rogues, things are different. Although they don't use swords, they still use spears. The spearheads of their spears will only become blunt after piercing dozens or hundreds of monsters, and sometimes they will never need maintenance. This is of course related to the fact that the blacksmiths here make the weapons as strong as possible, and they are willing to sacrifice their sharpness, relying on the rogues to use their own strength to exert their lethality. Who said that you can't kill people without a gun head? It's okay to have no gun head, and it's okay to be blunt. The productivity of the dark world is not developed enough, and the resources are even more scarce after entering the end of the world. The weapons of the rogues are relatively strong, which is also a choice to adapt to the environment. So in the eyes of the rogues, it is unacceptable that weapons and equipment are easily damaged. But for Ruger, he might have been confused by the common phenomenon of popular entertainment works before, but after becoming a mechanic, how could he not know how fragile the weapons and equipment are? Especially for modern weapons and equipment, it is easy to compress the service life as much as possible in pursuit of performance from the design stage. Saying that modern wars are fought on logistics, economy, and productivity, all mean the same thing, which is to imply or even explicitly state this matter. Because of this, although Ruger heard the chattering of the roaches, he did not refute it, but smiled bitterly, put away his notebook and stood up. "What should I do, Luigi?" Seeing him stand up, Tia hurriedly asked. She meant, should we let Lauguazeo come back first? Ruger also understood what she meant, so he immediately shook his head and pointed to the position where the two anti-aircraft machine guns sent out the fire snakes. His meaning was very clear, that is, to let Tia send Lauguazeo to see what was going on there. It is already very new to see monsters using the weapons of the Lost Ones. They even use anti-aircraft machine guns, which are relatively heavy firepower. This is not a good phenomenon. Anti-aircraft machine guns are used for air defense when fired into the sky, and they are used to attack infantry units when laid flat, which is a ground-based killer. Ruger's own heavy weapons were the World War II Type 88 guns, which are typical weapons of this type. Of course, he knows how terrifying this thing will be if it is used against him. However, before Tia could receive the latest reconnaissance information from Lauguazao, a series of dense engine roars were heard in the factories around a huge playground. Then, everyone saw a series of domineering tanks painted in forest camouflage driving out of those factories. What are these? Steel behemoths. The Rogs were all surprised when they saw the metal monsters in front of them. "Hey, this thing looks like the tank you left for that violent muscle girl." Anya, who had seen what tanks looked like, also exclaimed in Ruger's ear. "I don't think I've seen these." This is the comment of the well-informed Tia. "Yeah." Sarah, who was also well-informed, nodded in agreement with Tia's evaluation. Ruger thought to himself that you haven't seen them, but I haven't seen them either. Look at what tanks these are. The first one is the Leopard 2 main battle tank. Although the flat face of the front gun barrel is only a model before the Leopard 2A4, it is still a third-generation main battle tank. And the PZH 2000 Type 155mm self-propelled howitzers with long gun barrels in the back row. What does it mean that these long-range killers appear here? Although the absolute number of these modern tanks is not large, there are only 5 Leopard 2A4 tanks and even only 3 PZH 2000 self-propelled artillery, but Ruger knows that these things are much more powerful than their predecessors in World War II. Especially the 5 main battle tanks, after driving out of the factory, they have turned around and slowly pressed towards Ruger. At the same time, the 3 self-propelled howitzers in the back row have raised their muzzles and aimed here. Damn, this is a trap, the dagger is revealed. Ruger cursed in his heart, and finally understood another thing. What playground? A giant's playground. This is simply a military camp. The military camp of the armored forces. In this case, Ruger dared not delay, and hurriedly pulled the 2 women on his left and right and ran towards the factory where the stairs were before. Hey? Are you running again? Are these things very powerful? The rogues just expressed some incomprehension, and the 3 155mm howitzers over there immediately roared. The NATO standard high-explosive fragmentation shells fired by that thing weighed 40 or 50 kilograms. Although like all high-explosive shells, the bulk of the weight is the metal material that acts as fragments, but the internal explosives must also be close to 10 kilograms. For this shell alone, its effective killing radius is more than 50 meters, and the maximum killing radius can even reach nearly 400 meters. Of course, this is still a high-explosive fragmentation shell. As I have said countless times before, the main reason for the lethality of high-explosive fragmentation shells is the same as that of guns and bullets, which is the damage caused to the human body by high kinetic fragments. This means that as long as the armor can defend against the direct hit of large caliber kinetic energy shells, it can resist most of the damage caused by this kind of high explosive fragmentation shells. For example, Lugger wearing Iron Man armor made of energy material. As long as the high explosive bomb didn't explode within 1 meter in front of him and wasn't knocked over by the high energy shockwave that erupted instantly, he wouldn't have to worry about the remaining fragments. However, the few rogues with thin armor couldn't do that. Their small bodies wouldn't have higher direct defense than nightmare-level monsters. After all, they were agile rogues who relied on not letting the enemy hit them, not relying on their defense. Although Lugger had never beaten a rogue, he had beaten a paladin and a witch. As for the latter two, they were unlikely to withstand 3 consecutive 762 caliber full-power rifle bullets within 50 meters. If they were really hit by a group of dozens of kilograms of fragments at close range, they would still be torn into rags like ordinary people. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Infinite Doomsday Start draws Luodu mechanic. Author, Shan Mao-ai-chi-ji. Chapter 179. When the Nephilim are at their strongest, one person may be stronger than a main battle tank, but these Nephilims in Rogtown are obviously not. Google search reading. If the strongest state of the Nephilim is considered to be 100% state, Shaladia Anya is almost between 20% and 30%. As for the 4 little Rajas, their ability to survive was only about 15%. With this ability, don't think about facing the 155mm high explosive fragmentation grenade head-on. It's better to escape with Lugger. Don't mention it, although the Rajas have some opinions on escaping, they are just words. A series of previous encounters had already enabled them to develop the good habit of listening to Ruger's command at critical moments. Before Lu Ji finished speaking, they were already running behind him. But after a few steps, they all fled back to a nearby factory. Then, I heard the huge roar of several grenades exploding not far outside the factory. And the tragic sound of the iron door that hadn't been closed being knocked open by the blast wave and massive fragments. What the hell is this? Is this so powerful? Yes, are they those steel giants? My dear, how can I fight like this? Which of us can withstand such a blow? Seeing this tragic situation, the Rajas started chirping again. But the core of this time, although it sounds panicked, is actually more of a joy. However, before I could rejoice for a long time, I heard the MP5 girl suddenly scream. Wait, where is Lady Sarah? Only then did the Lujas realize that the 4 of them and the 3 Lujas had all run back, but only their commander, Sarah, was not in the factory. No, it can't be right. Is it difficult, Lady Sarah? She. Bot, don't be so talkative. Lady Sarah is so strong, she must be fine. Although she said this, the G36 sister who refuted the HK21 sister also looked uneasy and had no confidence in her own judgment. Don't worry, you Lady Sarah is stronger than you have ever seen. Lugger thought about it and guessed that Sarah had probably transformed into Tegaman, so he immediately comforted the 4 little ones. Really? It must be, why do you need to ask? Yes, you are right, Lady Sarah will be fine. While the Rajas were making a fuss, Luj was not idle either. He first asked Taya to ask Lao Naokeo to come back to see how the situation was, and then immediately selected the weapons for the next counterattack. He has not forgotten that the 3 PZH-2000 self-propelled howitzers in the rear can only be regarded as supporting firepower. Their real enemy now is the 5 Leopard 2A4 main battle tanks. If these iron things rush over, they can flatten the outer wall of the factory in minutes. Their 120mm smoothbore cannon also has grenades, and the power of a 5-gun salvo will not be much less than that of the 155. Moreover, they also have specialized armor-piercing projectiles. Even the Ruger would not survive if it was hit directly by such a thing. So, does Ruger now have the guys on hand to take care of these things quickly? The anti-tank artillery array used to deal with the Cyber Dragon? Well, things get a little complicated again here. As we all know, modern main battle tanks were developed based on the successful experience on the battlefields of World War II. Its predecessor can be traced back to the medium-heavy tanks of World War II. And unlike light weapons, which have not changed much in terms of power, tanks themselves have made great progress in terms of attack, defense, and movement performance. By the time Leopard 2A4 arrives, this guy's frontal armor is almost equivalent to the average steel plate protection of 780 mm. As for Ruger's most powerful World War II anti-tank gun, its maximum penetration is just over the 300 mm average steel plate. Although most data point out that the Leopard 2A4 is relatively fragile among modern main battle tanks, its frontal armor protection against armor-piercing bullets is equivalent to an average steel plate of 700+ mm. But if it is attacked with modern armor-piercing bullets, its frontal armor will only have an average steel plate protection of about 400 mm. This is because the armor of modern main battle tanks uses composite materials, which has higher protection against armor penetration. As mentioned before, the arms race between spear and shield is ongoing. When the armor of World War II tanks was so thick that conventional armor-piercing bullets were difficult to penetrate, armor-piercing bullets using the Monroe effect appeared. In order to deal with armor-piercing projectiles, composite armor and even reactive armor of tanks were also invented. In order to deal with the new armor-piercing projectiles appeared. Tail-stabilized discarding sabot armor-piercing projectiles are commonly used on tank guns. Tandem warhead armor-piercing projectiles are commonly used in anti-tank rocket launchers and other weapons. Because of this, the penetration depth of modern main battle tanks' armor-resistant armor-piercing projectiles is different from that of anti-armor penetrating projectiles. In most cases, the former is greater than the latter. But for Ruger, this point doesn't mean much yet, because he doesn't have a cannon specifically designed to fire fin-stabilized discarding sabots. For Ruger, who uses an anti-tank gun, if he fires at the front of those tanks, it will not have any real impact on the tanks unless he happens to hit the fragile but tiny sighting system components of those tanks. A grenade fired from the tank or even an armor-piercing projectile was enough to destroy the old Ruger anti-tank guns from the World War II era. But, does he have no other option at all? As I said before, this matter is a bit complicated. The simple answer is, no, of course he has other ways. For example, if the frontal armor cannot be penetrated, can't he attack the side, back, or even the top or bottom armor? Just like when Minerva dealt with the Cyber Brute, didn't she successfully use 1 kilogram of TNT to successfully destroy a set of track systems of that guy? After all, the Leopard 2A4 is still the main battle tank of the Cold War, facing large-scale frontal combat of the Army. And it is particularly targeted to fight against the steel torrent from the east on the homeland. So in order to use the best steel on the blade, it stacks high defense for the frontal armor, and has to give up the defense of the side and back. This gives Ruger another possibility of fighting, going around behind them and attacking their vulnerable parts. In addition, if it doesn't work, he can just spend a little money to buy anti-tank rockets. It's not like he hasn't recycled the launcher before. The equivalent penetration depth of the Matador anti-tank rocket is about 500 mm average armor. This data is not very effective against Leopard 2A4. After all, it is a domestic product, and we are afraid of using the enemy's own spear to attack the enemy's shield, which will not look good for anyone. However, using this thing to attack the side armor and rear armor still has a considerable success rate. It sounds troublesome, but in fact, it only took Ruger a few seconds to go through all these things in his mind, and he was ready to run out to support Sarah and counter-attack the main battle tank attack. However, just as he pulled Tia, who was also wearing Iron Man armor, and was about to go out, he heard a loudspeaker outside debugging signal. At the same time, the lights that seemed to have not eaten and were about to starve to death before, now seemed to have been injected with nutrient solution, and they were glowing and radiating with vigor. These lights that have recovered their spirits instantly illuminated the outside world like daylight. Infinite Doomsday Start draws Luodu mechanic. Author, Shan Mao Ai-Chi-Ji. Chapter 180. Soon, the same voice as the one in the magic recorder sounded from the loudspeaker outside. Ha ha ha, what do you think? Didn't expect that I have such a powerful weapon. Dare to destroy my blood pool, you guys are dead. Hide, right? Do you think hiding will be fine? Humph, you can't hide. Escape? Unfortunately, the way back has been blocked by my people. You are now a group of helpless little mice, you can only dig holes in the last piece of soil to escape. You don't have much time left. Soon, my mousetrap will dig you out, and grind you bastards into meat paste bit by bit. Okay. Ruger sighed in his heart. He didn't care much about the resentment of the bloody countess. After all, his group of people came here with the purpose of killing this guy and his family, so why would they be afraid of her counterattack in the end? He just had a further judgment on the ability that this guy really mastered. It is one thing to have a monster who can use firearms, but it is another to use an anti-aircraft machine gun and successfully hit an aircraft. Similarly, it is one thing for a subordinate to start a main battle tank self-propelled artillery, but it is another to make them fire and shoot accurately. Now, she can actually control the radio loudspeaker of the Lost Relics barracks. This shows that her control over this place is likely to be close to or even reach the level of control that the former strange leader E-52 had over the underground arsenal. In this case, the mousetrap she mentioned will eventually catch everyone, and it is not just a false and cruel word. This also means that she should have more than just main battle tanks and self-propelled artillery, which are small but fierce weapons, and there should be other means. For example, means to detect everyone's position. But now, Ruger doesn't think it is necessary for her to use this means. However, just as Lugger was getting angry, the bloody countess, who had just used the loudspeaker to vent her anger, suddenly shouted in a panic. What is this? Armor. When did human armor reach this level? Quick, you guys, ignore the little bugs hiding in the ground, kill this guy first. Cannon, quick, bomb her to death. What the hell? Lugger ran out in a hurry and saw Sarah, who had transformed into an Iron Man warrior, shuttling back and forth between several main battle tanks like a Valkyrie. Although the weapons in her hands were not a big threat to the tanks themselves could do nothing about her fast movement. The coaxial machine gun on the turret could hit her twice if she was lucky, but it was easily blocked by the Iron Man armor. The whole scene gave Lugger the feeling that it was like a beautiful circus trainer playing with a group of lions. Seeing Sarah playing with 5 leopards alone, Ruger felt like laughing but also felt relieved. He waved to Tia, who had also completed the transformation into Iron Man, and asked her to let Old Noisy come back quickly. He then took up the rapid-fire gun and joined the battle of the leopards. The next moment, before he had run out for long, as Tia closed her eyes and opened them again, Old Noisy rushed out of her Iron Man armor like a wild horse. Ruger saw that it was just right, and quickly pointed at Old Noisy, and then pointed at a leopard 2A4, signaling it to go in and see where the weakest part of this thing was. As long as the weak area is marked for him, the 30mm armor-piercing bullet is not completely unusable. At least, it shouldn't be a problem to destroy the track. Old Noisy has become more and more obedient recently. Not only to Tia, but also to Ruger. Seeing that Ruger only made 2 gestures, the guy kicked his legs in the air and rushed towards the tank target marked by Ruger. During the previous period, although Ruger and others were hunting everywhere, at least half of the time was spent in the second sanctuary. The second sanctuary belongs to the ruins of the lost, and the few scattered demonic energy has been cleaned up, and it has become an electronic oasis where electronic devices can be used at will. So every time he returns here, Ruger takes out various electronic devices for it to learn and play. Although it sounds like the kind of sheep-herding parents with bare children, Ruger himself is not without participation. After all, he let Luodu familiarize himself with various electronic devices in order to improve its electronic countermeasure capabilities and prepare for possible future battles. Playing and learning here for a long time, the two are not enemies like Tia Anya, so the relationship is naturally getting better and better. Ruger is also quite proud of raising a shadow cat like a hound. Watching Luodu rushing into the tank in the air, Ruger also casually turned on the augmented reality glasses in his helmet. This thing is originally a necessary module for advanced individual information systems. It can be displayed on devices such as soldiers' tactical goggles. For example, the remaining ammunition can be displayed in larger and clearer fonts on firearms equipped with corresponding electronic chips, and the point where the muzzle is pointing can be directly marked in the lens through the sight chip. Even the outline of the enemy's shadow detected by the drone can be rendered and marked in the field of vision. In short, it allows soldiers on the real battlefield to obtain detailed battlefield information of the same level as in the display interface of electronic games. Of course, all of the above require corresponding information providers. If you want to know the remaining ammunition, the gun itself, especially the magazine, must have a chip that automatically identifies the number of internal ammunition and transmits this information to the glasses in a timely manner. If you want to see the enemy's shadow outline, you also need reconnaissance equipment such as drones to record the reconnaissance data and send it to the glasses after processing. But Ruger does not have these data-providing devices. He only has Old Noisy. Ruger turned on the augmented reality glasses just to let Old Noisy act as the data provider. Soon, Old Noisy, who had turned around in the Leopard 2A4, jumped out of its outer armor and flew into Ruger's helmet in 2 or 3 moves. At the same time, the augmented reality glasses, which had no data except the basic interface before, also showed the perspective view of the Leopard 2A4 main battle tank in front of them. In the picture, the outline of each part is clearly visible, and even the outline of the DM-11 Type 120x570mm high-explosive tank shell in the barrel is marked. This made Luger feel very happy. He praised Luodu for his good work. He also hurriedly changed his perspective. While dodging and jumping back and forth among the tanks, he looked at the side and rear of the Leopard 2A4, intending to aim at the weak point there to see if his 30mm rapid-fire gun could penetrate the thin armor on the side and rear of the guy. However, as soon as his sight moved from the barrel to the side and rear, he suddenly subconsciously felt that something was wrong and hurriedly looked back at the turret.